Okay, awesome. So we're going to get started. So welcome everyone who's here. And if you're listening to the replay, you can type like a hashtag replay. Let us know where you're tuning in from. Those of you who are in here, if you just want to put maybe your name and where you're from in the chat, that would be super helpful. I know some people here. So my name's Alana Shaked. I am a women's executive and lifestyle coach, and I focus on helping women make big career transitions to balanced and fulfilling lives and careers. And I'm really excited about the guest that I am going to be talking to today, Tal Shavit, who is just an amazing woman. I'm actually going to kind of give her the microphone to sort of explain a little bit about her background in a second. But I just want to say how grateful I am that she's coming on here today, because I know that specifically she has information that I'm really interested in, that I know a lot of you guys will be really, really interested in. It's a very cool topic, and she's made a very amazing transition and has an incredible story. So I'm really excited about this. And then just to let you guys know also, like if there's questions, like you can type them in the chat, and then either in the middle or at the end, I'll kind of like monitor the chat. And so that way, if there's any questions for Tal, we can do that as well. Okay, cool. So I'm going to hand it over to Tal for a second. And Tal, if you can just tell us a little bit about yourself, and how you started out your career, and like why you were initially drawn to the first career steps that you had. Like when you first finished your studies, like where did you go from there?
Yeah. So I'm also really happy to be here and thank you for inviting me. It's been really both our preliminary conversation and kind of like the setup for this. It feels really, I told you this in private, but I think you're building something really, really beautiful with this community. So thank you. Um, so for me, I've had at least three career shifts in my 35 years of living. And so we can start chronologically and start kind of like from the beginning. So when I finished my degree, I finished master's in business administration and a bachelor's in philosophy and political science. I did it together, and I got this really prestigious internship as a lobbyist in one of the biggest lobbying companies in Israel, and I worked in the Knesset. And it felt super cool, both talking to Knesset members and talking to high people in the industry and kind of like pulling different strings. And they told me very clearly at the first, like in the interviews, that listen, this is just an internship. All the people here are above 40. So when you finish your school, it's done. And then 2 months before I finished school, they're like, okay, we want to hire you. Let's see how this works. And so I started working there. and and that time was kind of like my first the first career shift. I had received a few months after starting to work there. I had received an offer to manage the organization that I grew up in. It's a social organization, an NGO called Seeds of Peace, that does a conflict transformation, Israel Palestine, but also in different places around the world. And I received this offer, and I was like, oh God, this is so not the direction that I wanted, and I wanted to do kind of like quote unquote prestigious things and like more around business, like build the network and so on. And and I was like, and the pay isn't as good. And my manager at that time in the lobbying company was like, I told her that this has come up, and she said, listen, and 2 years from now, I am going to be the CEO of this company, and you're going to manage the Knesset team. So, like, think wisely if you want to move. And she indeed, after 3 years, became the CEO of the company, but I did not stay. I remember going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth with this, and making notes and lists and kind of like yes and at the end, a good friend of mine asked me a question that made it very clear. He said, "Okay, but what does your heart say?" And I was like, "That's easy. Of course, my heart says I'm going to go and manage this organization now." Um, so I did that, and I did that for 2.5 years, and I did that during 2 wars. So it was a bit of an intense ride to manage a peace organization and during 2 wars. And that was kind of like the first big big shift. And then after finish, at some point, it became clear that this is not what I want to do anymore. I want to do, and I was like, okay, this doesn't feel right anymore. This doesn't feel like I want to continue. I brought the organization to a certain place, and now let's see what's next. And it felt very clear that if I continue to remain within the organization, it's going to be hard for me to understand fully and clearly what it is that I want to do. So this is the first time that I left without a plan. And I left a relatively good paying job I was pretty young, like 27. And that was the first kind of like jump into the unknown. And just allowed time for creation and for for exploration. And what came from that was, okay, I've done a deep impact, but not broad, like with individuals. So I want to do deep impact. I want to do deep impact, but at scale. And we're good with like, we want to go chronologically, or you want to,
Yeah,
or you
no,
want
this is
to,
fine. You're just giving us kind of the background right now, and it's really helpful. So this is perfect. Yeah.
good. So I said I want to go deep, and I want to go broad. And so I got into impact tech. And I was consulting startups in impact tech, and I opened my own company. That's a health tech that was focused on tuberculosis on rural areas. And I was like, this is the biggest problem that impacts the most people, 20 million in the world die. And this is the broadest and the deepest that I can touch. And I went to India, and we were partnering with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. But then something still felt like, okay, something here isn't necessarily aligned. And actually during W, which is where we met in Women's Network, the first time I was there, we had a session around fall in love with the problem. And I was thinking about this problem I was thinking about this woman, this like middle-aged woman from rural India who has tuberculosis. And it to the mind, it felt like a noble, so yeah, a noble question to answer, or a noble cause to help, but it felt so distant to me. It felt like something that's so far away. And even when I was in India, it felt so far away from my day to day. So I realized that this isn't the direction for now. And then I did another shift, and I joined McKinsey. Um, and I said, okay, I wanna kind of like understand. I wanna get a deep, deep, deep understanding of business and how the world works, and kind of like have a boot camp of this world. And so I did that for 3 years, and I consulted companies and governments around the world in topics mainly strategy and organization. And it was indeed a boot camp for business, and also a boot camp for kind of like the things that are harsh, and even sick, in today's kind of like work environment.
Mhm.
Um, and and I think there leaving McKinsey was probably the biggest, or the most terrifying move or shift,
Like when you were at
because
McKinsey,
mm,
what were some, because you did a lot of your shifts were fairly intentional, right? Like it's like you thought about it, you were like, this is what I want to go broader, I want to scale, I want to get a business boot camp. Like it wasn't like you were just chasing, okay, well, this is what somebody else told me I had to do, or this is kind of what looks good on paper. You were really like, you were thoughtful about it. But
I yeah,
still,
go ahead.
oh, no, but so what I was going to say is, but still, you're at McKinsey, you stay there for 3 years. When did you start to feel the signs that, again, it wasn't truly in alignment with what you wanted to be doing? And like, what were some of those symptoms? Like, how did you diagnose the problem?
That's a good question. So, um, a few things. One is, this is a story that I tell often. It's like I was in this beach in Thailand. I had just come back from this really fancy conference of McKinsey in Singapore, and I was like, "Mm, I'm feeling so good. I'm feeling so at ease. I'm feeling so relaxed." And then all of a sudden, it was like a slap in the face. I was like, "How is this so different than how my day to day looks like? Like, why is the gap so big of like there's this me who is centered and happy and relaxed and able to connect with others and be present um, at a vacation, in a party, in a festival. And then there's this me that's during the week that is so very stressed, that is not sleeping well, that is having a very that is kind of like going by with life. And that's not to say that it's not there weren't moments of like, holy shit, I can't believe that this is what I do for a job. Like I consulted really crazy, huge topics and like huge impact and like really some of the smartest people in the world and the forefront of technology. I remember there was one time I was doing this project around quantum computing for this pretty known Japanese tech company. And I was talking to the person who was the lead algorithms developer for quantum computing, and we had this hour-long conversation about the future of AI. This is quite some time ago already.
Hmm.
And I remember that when I left the conversation, I had to, this is in London, I had to run around the building a few times because I was so like, oh my God, this is amazing. But that is such a contrast to the day to day. And for me, one of the symptoms is weight gain. One of the ways that I kind of like medicate is with food. And so there was a substantial weight gain when I was in McKinsey. And I started seeing it around halfway. I was like, wow, like something is really off track there. Um, and I think it was things that were I I can in hindsight I can say some of the symptoms, but when I was there, it wasn't it didn't feel like that. It felt the reason why I decided to leave at the end were two. One is because I had split with my partner. I was engaged and we were together for 7 years and we had split, and I had felt like there's a big personal spiritual transformation kind of like on the verge. And it was right when I was up for promotion, so if I would have ignored it and worked on the promotion, then I would have bypassed something very deep, which indeed it was. So that was one reason, and the second reason um was more around this larger macro view of the world of like, at the end of the day, I'm supporting these old structures of capitalism, of patriarchy, and I'm telling myself, well, I'm making it better, and I'm making it like I'm doing a bit better here and a bit more sustainable here. But at the end of the day, I saw this like capitalism, or not like these old ways of working, as this really big ship, um, and like on the bottom ends of the ship, you have all these people who are dying and like putting the coals in the machine. And for sure, I was like at one of the top levels and pretty comfortable, and we're working on a machine, making it a bit more efficient. But at the end of the day, my energy is towards this ship, and that's when. And I use this ship metaphor because I was really kind of like, okay, it's time to jump ship, and I have no idea. I have no
Right.
idea where I'm going, and I'm giving up a lot. I'm giving up a lot.
And what do you feel like you had to let go of in order to be able to jump ship? Like what were some of the like long held like the automatic beliefs or like judgments from family, society? Like how did this impact your relationships when you decided to make this move or when you were thinking about it?
Mm. So I have to say that I'm relatively lucky in terms of the external world that I have around me. Uh, like I didn't have a lot of feedback, external feedback of like, what are you gonna do? And also I think for whoever is listening, if you haven't had these jumps into the unknown, and you've kind of had this like job and then another job and then another job, and this feeling of something that's a bit more linear, I think both internally and externally, there's a lot more fear that comes up. But since I already kind of like moved around, I think both externally it was easier, and internally the main thing that came up, which was very substantial, was this very basic survival fear. I like to talk about it like this feeling of when you're jumping off a bridge into the water. You know, we used to do this when we were kids. It's like jump, or you're in a roller coaster and the train goes like shoo, and you can feel literally your heart go
Mm-hmm.
like there. I have no ground under my feet. This is what it says. I have no ground under my feet. The body is like, and this is the most basic bottom of the pyramid Maslow needs. And so I had a lot of these fears coming up of like leaving a pretty high paid job and a very comfortable life and kind of like jumping into the complete unknown. And for me, it was also coupled with breaking up with my partner of 7 years. So it added to to this feeling. But I think that was kind of like the main thing that came up. The financial part of it was probably the main thing that came up for me.
Yeah, I think for a lot of people, that's probably like the number one thing that's stressing them out when they think about quitting their job. I know for me,
Yeah.
like when I had my first job as a lawyer, like that was definitely the main concern. Like, what would I do if I'm not doing this? Well, I don't know, but I certainly know that I wouldn't be making this kind of money. So, how can I make that move without having some certainty? And I actually ended up also quitting without a plan. But part of that, like leading up to that, and I know we're going to talk a little bit about like how to address the financial fear when you're doing something like this, when you're making this type of transition. But I remember for me, like maybe I should have done an even better job, but I definitely sort of like I had like a short-term plan in place. Like I didn't just like go in and quit the next day. Like I was like, all right, I need to like work for a couple more months. I want to make sure that I have like, this little fund over here to fund the next 6 months of my adventure. Like, so what would you recommend to people in terms of like how to deal with that type of a situation? Like, especially if they have financial obligations like children or something like that, or a mortgage or something where they're like, they really like, they really have responsibilities. Like, what would you suggest them to do?
So I have two ways of answering this, and I think I'm going to do both. One of them is kind of like the analytical, what can we do? How do we mitigate the risk? And what are kind of like the both the emotional risk, but also the financial risk, and how can we approach it, which I will talk about. And also, I don't wanna jump over what I experience as a very spiritual, let's call it adventure, with this thing around money and around abundance and around ability for kind of like the world or life, let's call it, to take care of me. So why don't we do both? Um, because at the end of the day, if we are leaving the job, but we're taking with us all of the same mindsets that we had previously of lack, of survival, of if I don't do I do things that are driven by my fears, then we're just gonna meet the same things in a few years after. It's not like just because we're quitting a job is not gonna solve things. It,
I
it
love that
does.
you're saying that. That's super, super important. Yes.
Yeah. Like it's just changing the external conditions, and it might create better conditions for us to thrive, but it doesn't necessarily mean it.
There's that
Um, eh,
saying that reminds me of like, no matter where you go, there you are. And it just
yeah,
reminds me of that. Like, you can't just run away from certain things and think that like finding the ideal job is going to fix absolutely everything. And that's why like your mindset and your personal development is so important. So sorry,
mm.
continue.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And people think that it's a lot of it is just like really looking these things in the eye and being like, oh, I am terrified as fuck.
Mhm.
Um, but what is cool is when the external reality also kind of like plays when life takes care of you. And what I've noticed more and more is that the more I open to the possibility that life can take care of me, and I am like, okay, I'm breathing, and I'm going forward anyway, then things come up which I couldn't even imagine. So you're saying, oh, I had a fund of money that I had put aside, and I decided. So what had happened to me is I I I had a few months. I had like 2 months that I was just taking kind of off, mainly to just balance myself from the breakup, and just take a bit of time to center. And then the HR manager asked me, okay, now is the time. We need to see if you're going for the promotion, and then we need to look for projects that are relevant for your promotion. And McKinsey it's very project based, or if you're deciding that you're continuing the leave and going. And this was about 2 weeks before the holidays. So um, for it, at that point it was clear to me that that I'm not going to continue. But I was like, wow, I can tell her, well, I'm in, and I'll look for a project, and then this will give me another month and a half at least. And a month and a half in McKinsey, it's pretty good. Like it's a pretty good salary. Um,
And
and I
it
remember,
sounds like a bunch of that you would have had like holiday anyways, so you're not
yeah,
really
yeah,
like working. Yeah.
and it's just a way to kind of like, let's take care a bit more, and let's just like move this a bit.
And I
Do
have
we
a
hear it?
question because yeah, I hear so many people get into this place where they're like, well, but shouldn't I feel guilty that I kind of already know that I'm not, and I'm like, no, don't feel guilty. They're like a huge company. Like this is the way that it works. Like they would do the same thing to you, right? Did you feel guilty at all when you made that decision, or were you just like, I'm doing what's best for me?
So I didn't stay,
Oh my
actually.
goodness. Okay. You are just like you have so much integrity. Wow.
I mean, so in this specific moment, but what had happened is, this is not about integrity, it's around authenticity. So it's kind of like, what's authentic to me? If what's authentic to me now is to take care of the parts of me that are scared, and make sure that my this is covered, even if it means lack of integrity or lying or whatever. Whatever is authentic, we can be what we can be at any given moment where we are. We can't, like, what makes so much suffering is this desire to be in a different place than where we are. So we can be what we can be. But for me at that moment, I remember I was like at this I was actually in nature with a group of friends, and we were looking we were looking at the sky, and I had this moment, and I was like, wow, I I want to live a life that's aligned, and I want to live a life that is deeply connected to myself and to the truth. And this means that this was Saturday. This means I'm gonna drive up to the office on Sunday, and I'm gonna tell them that I'm out.
Wow.
And I'm out, and I'm out starting, and then I'm out starting today. And I was like, whew. And this was like 2 3 days after we had this conversation. So even though I was a bit brewing with me leaving, it was not at all. I'm ready. I'm getting ready. And this is where it gets really interesting, because I had 3 months of paid time of paid they call it leave before you leave. So I had 3 months of kind of like still working.
Hmm.
And then this brought me to December. This is in 2019. This brought me to December of 2019. And then I wanted to apply for unemployment in Israel, and McKinsey would not give me a letter of
Oh,
that they
right.
fired me.
Mhm.
So I had to wait another 3 months. So this means I had more time of not getting paid. But this brought me to March 2020. And in March 2020, a lot of people were fired and had joined the COVID unemployment, which ended up being, instead of 6 months, ended up being 19 months. So because I had, and if I would have done this a month and a half, 2 months after, I would have not joined the COVID unemployment. So deciding, so this is, and for me, from what I've seen, this happens again and again and again and again. These things happen again and again and again of like, okay, I'm choosing to do something that feels aligned, and I'm doing it even though it's terrifying, but I trust, then things not necessarily align the way I would have wanted them to, or the way I would have imagined, is that just things make it so much easier. And because I had these 19 months of unemployment, I had so much freedom because there's no need for me to be very quick with what I want to do, because it's a pretty good unemployment if you come from a pretty good salary. So I had so much time and bandwidth to be like, okay.
Wow. That's
Um,
awesome. So
and that,
yeah,
but
sorry,
now,
go ahead.
but now there's the flip side, or like the more, not the flip side, but the analytical part. And for sure, and I want to state this, it's much easier to do it when you don't have kind of like the weigh down of responsibility of other humans, that you need to take care of, little humans that you brought into the world. So there's a lot more fear and a lot more responsibility, real, that you have when you're also taking care financially of other people. And so I want to both state that and speak a tiny bit about kind of like whatever the analytical things that we can do in order to mitigate that risk. And these are also things that I had done. I had just done them after I had left, and these are things that you can do before. And I think one of them, the key thing is kind of like really knowing the data. Okay, this is me talking about life and trust, but also know your numbers. Okay, like know what your current life costs, but also know what are the parts of your life that are not giving you joy, not from a judgmental point of view, like not from oh, I shouldn't buy these expensive clothes. No, it's all good. If this is the life that you want to be living, good. But for me, I had all these like taxis and restaurants and frankly, like more clothes than I would need. And I was like, I don't think that my life cost as much as I needed for me to cost to be happy. And I still want to be comfortable, and for me it was an exploration. I was like, I want to buy the best organic produce. Even if I don't have money for shoes, I want to buy good veggies. Um, and so knowing this gives you a lot of freedom, because the problem with our fear with money is it's this merge of emotionality and data, and we want to um, kind of like decouple them. We want to know when there's actually a real problem with the finance in terms of the data. We don't have enough money. That we won't be we will only have enough for 2 more months. Um, you can hear the
A little bit. That's fine though. It's not distracting.
good.
Don't worry about it.
Okay, good. Um, um, we're spending too much on this and so on, versus I have a fear of I don't have enough, I'm not going to have enough, I won't have enough, or if things don't come in. And I think a lot of people say, yeah, this is really important, but they don't end up doing it. They don't open the Excel and they don't
Yeah.
go over their expenses, and they're like, yeah, I know it's important, but I'm afraid. No, but no, actually do it.
Yeah. And
Because
I love
so many.
I love what you mentioned about like kind of auditing your expenses and being like, does this bring me joy? Because those are the things that you can actually work on cutting out. And that makes a lot of sense to me. I don't think most people have any idea what they spend every month, or what, whether or not the things that they're spending things on are actually bringing them joy in life. So huge. I love that strategy.
Yeah, and I think this is also part of the mindset bit, because we're like, okay, a friend of mine was like, I'm really proud of myself because I'm like I'm making rent and I'm working really hard and I'm doing it. And I'm like, is this like, is this the thing that we should be proud of? Like, oh, I'm living the lifestyle that I want, but did we check to see if this is actually the lifestyle that we want? And I do it once a year. I do it once a year. It's painful. It takes a few days. I go over my expenses. I power through it. And in the end, I have a lot more clarity, and a lot more freedom. So this is one thing. And then the second thing is, um, kind of, what I did at that point was after I was like, what is the minimum I need to be comfortable? I was like looking at my savings and say, you know what? I can give myself 3 months of this. This is the period that I didn't receive any money. I can take out of my savings and invest in myself, and give myself these 3 months to create stability, to not start hustling for ridiculous jobs or to not be preoccupied. It's a worthwhile investment from me, within me, from my savings. And this really helps to relax the part that is fearful, because the part that's like, we're never gonna find a job. I'm like, yeah, but I gave you money. I gave you money so you wouldn't think of this now. This is time where we're not thinking about these things because we want to allow for whatever wants to arise that is not fear-based, that is not based on the contraction, but is based on the expansion. And this is something that most people can do. And we have different ways of seeing risk, and we have different lifestyles, but most of us here have a way for at least a few months to be able to invest, in ourselves, and really do it with the full intention of, like, because what we do is we sneak into our savings, like we're eating ice cream from the fridge, right? We're like, I'm not eating it. I'm not eating it. I don't know. Let's just like open it, eat it. No. Take a bowl of ice cream, decide how much ice cream you're taking, sit down, put some sprinkles, be like, thank you for this ice cream, and eat the ice cream. Because otherwise, we're not reaping the benefits of taking from our savings if we're just kind of like nibbling from them.
And I like the way that you sort of couch that in terms of like this being an investment, like almost like as if you are a little company, right? Like you're a business, you're one person, but it's like you're investing in yourself. You're investing in a business. You have an investor, right? And that investor happens to be you. But I love that. And I also think it's so important to be able to eliminate some of that like pressure and stress, because if you have that on you, it's really, really hard to like freely and completely move forward in alignment. So my next question for you is about that alignment, because we entitled this conversation, How to Design a Career That Is Right for Your Lifestyle, right? So how did you decide what lifestyle you wanted to have? Like what was in alignment with your lifestyle? And then how did you come up with a career that fit well with that?
Okay. So if you've been keeping up with the story, it's 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 a career that's aligned for now.
Mm,
Like, and I think for most people, actually, Jolt made this term, which I love. It's called chapterships. You've heard of it?
I have not. No. Chapter
So
shape?
chapterships, it's like,
Oh, chapter
um,
shapes. Okay.
so traditional careers, it was like, I have one career, I have it for my entire life. And then now what people are talking about, that between 7 to 10 years, most people have a complete deep, career shift. Like they move from a completely different industry. Like, and then within that 7 to 10 years, there's also chapters, different chapterships of like 2 to 3 years. And this is usually also the average time that people stay in their current, positions in the company. So why am I saying this? I'm saying this because this is going to change so many times. I'm going to change so many times. What's aligned for now is not aligned, is not going to be aligned for tomorrow. So this skill set, this ability to sit in the unknown and then look at kind of like what is aligned now, is a skill set that's, more meaningful than getting to what is aligned now, because what is aligned now is going to change anyway. I'm saying this also to remind myself of, like, remember, you're going to sit in the unknown again soon. um so that's kind of like the kind of like the beginning of this. But currently, what I feel has been working for me, um, and I'm actually, and this is interesting because I'm in this shift now because I was more based in Israel, and I had a few big retainers, and I started feeling that being situated in one place doesn't feel good anymore, and being in Israel doesn't feel good anymore. And so right now I'm in this shift because I'm already living a life that's more nomadic, but I haven't had the clients come in yet. So I'm in this limbo state of no income, almost no income, which is actually a much more interesting place to be because it'll be like if I would have this conversation, it's kind of like everything's going amazing and my company's making millions. It would have been I think in a sense less relatable to be like, no, I'm not making any money now, and I don't know when my next income is going to come from. But I've done this enough times, and I have calculated how much time I have, and so on, and what is my fallback when I get to the fallback, what I do, and so on. So I'm like, okay, this is the point where I wait and I see because I want to live my life the way I want to live it. And then I'm going to see what arises. I'm going to see what opportunities come. I'm going to put offers into the world and I'm going to see. And maybe what I get from life is like, no, this is not what's aligned. The way I see this, if things require too much effort. Um, and so the way that I've chosen, and again, this is in a sense easier because I don't have kids yet. I have friends that are doing this also with the family, that I'm building my lifestyle. And I'm like, okay, if the way I live is what I optimize, I'm going to first do this and then see how the other things align. I have a friend that she has two girls, 9 and 11, and she takes several months, sometimes with them and sometimes without them, to be around in the world, and has told her company, I'm going to be remote for that time. And I have a few friends that are also with kids that are also doing this. There is a tiny bit less freedom because there's school and there's other things. But it's possible that I was just staying at this family for 2 months, this Canadian family that took their entire family, kids and everything, to live in Mexico and manage a resort.
Wow,
Um,
that's so
and I
fun.
was staying. It's so fun, and they're such a beautiful family, and it's also challenging homeschooling, and
Yeah.
the younger child who's 12 doesn't have a lot of peers. Everyone is like 20, 30-year-old yogis, but he's learning things that kids at his age are not going to learn. And the father is still he still needs to work, and he had created this time frame with his company that he used to manage of 2.5 years that he slowly phases out in 2.5 years. But he's like, I'm living this lifestyle. I'm
Yeah.
living this lifestyle that I want, and then because that's the priority. And again, the question is, what is authentic? Because if work authentically is what is a priority now, awesome. Then let's just say this is what the priority is, and for a year or for whatever, I'm releasing this ability to live more freely in terms of my lifestyle. But then there's less of a gap from where I am than where I need to be, and then there's less suffering. So
So you decided your kind of like basis started from the place of like, I don't want to be in Israel anymore. I want to basically be able to travel. And then you chose to basically work as like a consultant, right? Like you mentioned a retainer. So I'm guessing you have clients, right? Um, so is that work sort of like I'm doing this work in order to live, or is it sort of like also a business that you're really like tell us a little bit about what you do.
yay. So up until now, the retainers that I had, or I was very excited about them because I was doing, I do what I call heart-centered workplaces. So I was working with organizations to make the organization themselves be a place where people can feel centered and feel connected to each other and to themselves. And I think there's such a beautiful ability to do this. I was working with like Microsoft, and it's like some of the big tech companies, and there's for sure willingness. Yeah, there's for sure a willingness to make it happen. And also like also it's quite challenging. So I did that, and so now as I'm in this transition, one of the things I'm more excited about, you can see me going like less sure because it's like still in the pregnancy stage. It's not birth yet. But one of the things I really love is to work with management teams, and to work with management teams around how they can create within the management team this environment, and that in the end of the day trickles down to the organization a lot more than if we do like mindfulness training or whatever, or do yoga in the mornings. It's like, are we really living it? So this is something that I absolutely love to do, and then also working with individuals, which is very similar to what you do. So kind of like coaching individuals, um, to being able to kind of like, because at the end of the day, it's really hard to do it alone. Like we forget, we really forget. Um, and so now I'm launching this new research around what are the methodologies, the techniques, what are the things that really kind of like touch base for I call it intuitive decision making, but it's basically like this continuous connection to self, continuous connection to the deeper parts of ourselves, and building it deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper.
Wow. Well, thank you for that. I can totally tell that, just bringing it full circle back to like the first question I asked you, where, somebody asked you, what does your heart say about this? Like, I can tell that this is like all coming from your heart, and it's like, so your heart just seems so full. And I love that when you talk about what it is that you do with your life and your time, that you just light up, and that you trust that that's going to sustain your lifestyle that you want to have. So that's
I
just
hope.
awesome. Yes, I have full confidence. So tell us just one last question for you, because I know that we're getting a little late here. And then if anyone has any questions, like, feel free, you can start typing them in the chat, or you can ask them, you can raise your hand. But my last question for you is about your digital nomadism, which I'm slightly jealous of. So tell us about working from Mexico. Like, how did you decide to go to Mexico? What's great about it? What's not so great about it? If somebody else was considering doing something like what you're doing, what kind of words of wisdom would you offer them right now?
Wow. Get a case for your laptop. I think no, but really, I first is I think a big one is decoupling this notion of traveling and working.
Mhm.
Um, for me, that is I know some people who are digital nomads do that. They're like in travel mode. They move to a different place like every couple of days and see a lot of sightseeing. From what I see, it's just not like that. You're just living in other places, and it takes time. It takes time to. I love routines. Like I love a morning routine, and to meditate, and to exercise, and to eat well, um, and so just building that routine takes time, and it's also good to already kind of like feel into what your routine is when all the surroundings are changing. Like I like when you just had a 12-hour night bus and you thought you'd sleep but you don't sleep, and you get to a new place, and then you have this beautiful conversation. Like what are the things that you do, the meditation, the yoga, that kind of like helps to keep things balanced. But also not to expect this would be like a vacation, because it's not. Most of the days you're working on your computer, but you just have like the Mexican cleaning women on both sides cleaning both of the rooms. Uh, but in essence, it is very similar. And I also like this is a general thing for any big change that you want to make, unless it's something that's really like I have a full yes to this, is to experiment, versus saying I'm good and now I'm selling all my stuff and I'm going as doing a month here and doing a week or 2 months or whatever there, and like, oh, this works more, this works less, and just finding out what and seeing it as an experiment versus a life choice, or something that is very kind of like strong.
I love that, seeing it as an experiment and rather as like I'm making this choice and I can't go back, because that takes away so much of the fear, right? It's like, no, I can
Yeah,
always
what
go
if I
back.
want to
Like,
go back to work in
okay.
an office and just have an apartment? Oh my God, what will my friends say?
Oh, goodness. Well, thank you so much. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you want to share with us right now?
Yeah, I think the last thing is just like right here we're speaking about it in a relatively light manner and kind of like in many ways in hindsight. And I just wanna kind of like echo how hard these things are. And like the vast majority of people are deeply unhappy where they are in their career and their job, and they don't make the shift. And they don't make the shift not because they're lazy or because they don't have inspiration. They don't make the shift because it really is terrifying, and there aren't a lot of module models and kind of like cognitive frameworks and examples of times where it did work. And kind of like all of our basic survival, everything has taught us otherwise. So if it's feeling really, really, really hard, um, there's a reason for that. And I just want to put that in the front, and that things come in their own time. And if now is not the time, that's also perfectly, perfectly, perfectly fine. And if it feels like the time, hell yeah, the jump into the abyss.
I love it. Somebody told me, leap and the net will appear. And I sort
Yes.
of like to think of it as like, yes, leap and the net will appear, but that's what other people are there for, like you, like me. It's to help give you a little bit of a safety net, to show you that there are other people out there who are doing this, who have done it, that there are other ways of thinking about this. And it's not just living in that little box. And I think, kind of like you mentioned, this whole shift from like the chapter ship um, into like what things used to be, where somebody just had one linear career their whole life. And I think a lot of us who are children of the baby boomer generation specifically really have not totally, especially in the United States, really have not totally been able to separate our mentality from that, even though that's no longer really the way that things are working. So I think, it's just everything that you said is so incredibly helpful to this community. I do want to just ask if anyone wants to ask any questions right now. This would be the time. All
It
right.
can be, it can, feel free to ask anything.
Yeah, feel free to ask her anything. Before we started this call, we were talking about periods, guys. So, all right. Well, if you guys do end up having questions, please just feel free to actually, Tal, how can people get in touch with you?
So I think Facebook is Facebook or LinkedIn are probably best. But if you're watching the video and I think you're gonna tag me in the video anyway. Yeah.
Yeah.
So feel free to just PM me. I'm happy to help with whatever random as it may seem to you. I'm happy to assist. Uh, and now and in hopes that we live a more and more heart-centered life.
Yes. Amen to that. Well, thank you so much again, Tal. Thanks everyone who came here live. And for those who aren't here live, again, just let us know if you're watching the replay, and you can type questions in the comments and I will sort of look at them. I'll let Tal know if there's anything to answer. And if you guys are thinking about making this change, if this is something that you really resonated with you, or that you're, really understanding, oh yeah, I have that fear, or I, really resonate with what she's saying, please reach out. Again, you don't have to do this alone. For some people, this can be really scary, but there are other people who have gone before you and who have made these leaps and transitions, and it is possible. And a lot of it really is just about opening yourself up and having the kind of mindset that we just heard today, where it's just like the heart-based approach, just having such an open heart, the way that Tal has. So, all right. Well, thank you so much again. And I hope we get to talk again soon, Tal. I'm gonna download this and post this in the group ASAP. Okay,
Beautiful. Thank you
everyone.
so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Maggie. Thank you. Take care, everyone.